Welcome. I'm glad you came back, and we're going to have our lecture today for week number 9. And let's go ahead and go to our PowerPoint. We're going to be learning about Native Nations of California this week. As usual, let's take a look at our study guide first. Here's our study guide for week number 9. And as we scroll down, you see that it's a familiar way that it's laid out, with yellow highlighted parts that include some parts that I'll be talking about today. Other parts you'll be able to look up within your book. And it also has these other important facts for you to learn, but we pay particular attention to the ones that have yellow highlighting. We're going to take a look at the map of California. I'm assuming that most of you living in California are familiar with the state, but some of you might not have traveled throughout the state, and hopefully you'll have that opportunity in the future. This is Southern California, and all of these different colored areas are for different tribes. And you've already learned about the Yuma tribe, which is down here down here, with touching on Arizona, almost into California. But the Yuma Indians did go back and forth because, of course, back then there wasn't a California when the tribe was where it traditionally was located. And we'll talk about the geography briefly. So here we have the coastline with the Pacific Ocean. There's various islands. And as you probably know, if you go inland just a little bit from San Diego and all the way up, except not so much when you're near LA, Long Beach, there are mountains. It's the coastal range. And then when you get above Long Beach, then the coastal range continues all the way up to Oregon. On this side, we have the Sierra Nevada mountains. So if you've heard of Tahoe, places like that, that's up in the Sierra Nevada, which range from 5,000 to 7,000 feet above sea level. Coastal range is not quite as high. And in between, down here, we have deserts. And to the north, we have a huge valley. Here's the map of Northern California. And you'll see this, there's two of them next to each other, two maps, both of Northern California. And the one on the right has different language groups. So this shows you the different tribes. And you see that this red here, for example, for the Modoc overlaps pretty much, but it's interesting to see the two different ways that it's presented. Where we live, we have Pomo Indians, and also near Clear Lake, the Miwok. And these tribes were all trading with each other, cooperating with each other, usually. We have the coastal range, the coastal mountains we talked about running right along here, Sonoma Mountain and so on. And then here we have this great valley, the Sacramento San Joaquin Valley. Up here, if you've ever been on Highway 5, it goes up this way. And up here we have more mountains, and then we have the Sierra Nevada that run close to the border with Nevada. The book talks about acorns and that they were an important staple. Staple means a food that is the main food for a people. Once the acorns are gathered and shelled, they have to be ground up. And you may have even seen along riverbanks around Sonoma County stones that look like somebody's done something with them, especially a flat stone. And what the native people used to do is put the acorns on those flat stones, like a big pan or plate, and then rub another stone, usually a rounder stone, on top until the acorns turned into a meal, or kind of like a thick flour type of thing. Those acorns cannot be eaten raw by humans. Pigs, wild pigs and goats and other animals can eat them raw, but we can't because they have tannic acid. And tannic acid is a sort of a bitter tasting chemical that's in it. And if you were to eat too much of it, it would make you sick. So the native peoples were very clever, and they figured out that if they leached it, where they pour water over and over and over the mush, the tannic acid would leave and the good, nutritious food would be left. And then they would put that clean, nutritious mush into watertight baskets. And they would put some water in there with the mush and with hot stones, very hot stones, so hot that if they just put it into the basket, it would burn right through. And then they had hoop kinds of implements that they would use to stir the hot rocks around and around and around in the basket. And that would make the mush get very hot. The book talks about they would use hot water to remove the tannic acid, but I've seen traditional Indians make the acorn mush into food, and they just used cold water next to a stream. They leach it that way. And some people now, if you look on the internet, will say if you use hot water to leach it, it actually will make the cornmeal not taste very good. Well, so some of this I've already talked about. But the reason we go into the detail, anthropologists are interested in this, is because all throughout California, native peoples ate acorns, and there were a lot of different kinds of acorn oak trees that were around. And it provided so much food that people did not lack the ability to have enough food. There was plenty of food for the number of people that lived in the state. And that led to less warlike behavior, more cooperation. It also led to quite a bit of time each day that people didn't necessarily have to work, because gathering the food and hunting and making the baskets, making the clothes, teaching children things, they didn't work as long as some of the people do who are commuting from Santa Rosa to the Bay Area, working a job 8 or 9 hours a day and then driving back. Those people work a lot more than native people would normally have to work back in the olden days before contact with Europeans. Another way of leaching the cornmeal, besides putting some sort of vegetable matter like leaves on top of sand and then putting the acorn mush and then having some leaves on top so that when you pour the water, it doesn't splash the mush out. Another way of doing it was to put it in a basket and then to have that basket be next to a creek so that the water could go through it. I don't know if that was done commonly, because if you did that, probably a raccoon would come along, a skunk, some other creature, and would eat the stuff when you were gone. But it was recommended online that that's the way that some people do that. They have stories about their ancestors doing it that way, which may be the case. Women made the baskets, and we have some famous, very important basket makers from Sonoma County, from Mendocino County, whose baskets became quite collectible, and they've taught other people how to make these baskets. The baskets are just made out of local materials. If they're making a very pretty basket, they would sometimes take the feathers from a hummingbird that might be very bright or red or other colors, and they'll weave those feathers into a small basket, which isn't so much a basket you'd use for cooking. It's just more of a basket made for beauty. Oh, well, so the men are the ones that did the hunting, and we'll talk about gender roles in a minute, but they would normally be doing most of the hunting, rabbits with snares, slings with not slingshots, but a sling that's a loop of twine with something to hold the rock and another piece of twine so that you would spin it around your head and throw it at an animal, bows and arrows, different kinds of traps. And besides the birds, they would also eat deer and bears. California used to have grizzly bears all over the state. There's a picture of a grizzly bear in our slide. And then when the Americans came, there were still bears when the Mexicans were running California, but when the Americans came, they pretty much killed off all the grizzlies. They thought it was great to kill them and possibly eat them. So even though we are the bear flag republic, the grizzly bear is gone. Now we just have black bears. And people do still hunt black bears and eat them. And my grandfather told me about a friend of his, an old lady who would go and hunt black bears, have it ground up, and then mix the ground bear meat with lard, which is pig fat, and it would be mixed half and half because the bear meat was so dry and not very tender, and then would give these bear burgers to a group of men that were housed at her house. So she was doing room and board for adult men, and she would give them these bear burgers every day. A true story. So rigid sex division of labor was absent in most groups. It's in blue, so you'll try to remember that. It could be on a quiz. So even though they did have a division of labor, it was not inflexible. So sometimes there'd be collaborative work, and that was more normal. Usually men and boys only did the hunting, but they could help each other with gathering acorns, maybe gathering some of the roots that they would eat. The California Indians but would hunt out and find so many wild roots that when the gold rush miners first came, they called the native people diggers because they saw them up on hills digging, looking for various roots that they were able to eat. So as you probably know from when you've learned about California history, hopefully when you were fourth grade, the California native peoples didn't have any European contact until the mid 1700s, when Father Serra and other Spanish priests with Spanish soldiers came up and created the King's Highway from Southern California all the way up to Sonoma. And they built a series of missions, and they got the native people, or compelled the native people, to become part of their communities where they had these missions. And they started agriculture because the Indians in the California generally didn't grow plants because they didn't have to, because they had the acorns. So they started growing corn and beans and so on, various things like other native peoples do in the Southwest. And the native peoples, had lived that way for the ones that were around the Spanish missions for about 50, 60 years. And then there was a revolution in independence in Mexico. The California became part of Mexico, no longer part of New Spain. And then the missions lost their land, almost all their land, to ranchos that were granted by the Mexican government. And most of the Native Americans continue to live in the area. If they've been on a mission, they might be destitute because there's no more mission, but some of them started working for the Mexican ranchers. And the Mexican ranchers did not want oak trees around because the oak trees would provide less pasture land. So they would kill the oak trees, sometimes by collaring or chopping all the way around at the bottom part, a foot or two off the ground around a tree, so that it kills the bark. Then the tree dies, and then eventually the tree is knocked over and burned up. Then they would raise cows. They raised the cows, and there's a picture here of a Californio, Mexican fellow who has this dead cow. The cows would be killed, and there weren't enough people to eat all the meat because there's hundreds of pounds every time you kill a cow, but there weren't that many Mexicans and there weren't that many native peoples here at that time. So they would have this extra meat that would just rot, and they would take the skin and they would cure it, and then it would be sent to Boston and other parts of the world where the skin would be made into shoes. So some of the Eastern tribes and Midwestern tribes, like the Comanches, had warriors, and they had pretty large-scale wars and raids against other peoples. In California, as best we understand it, they didn't have those type of wars, but instead there would sometimes be fighting between tribes or bands because of some sort of grudge that happened or something bad that had happened in the past, which we've heard this theme for Native peoples in other parts of the United States. And of course, it happened in Europe too. So people would have this feud with each other, and then they might have a sneak attack and they would kill someone. And then down the road, those people would come back and kill one of your people. So that did happen in California. The other thing that happened is that someone they might capture would become a slave and would have to do work for the tribe that captured the person. They might eventually be adopted, especially if it was a child, by the tribe. This kind of approach of, sneak attack or, a surprise attack didn't really work against the Spanish. They had much better weapons. They had horses, and they were able to dominate the native peoples wherever they went. Plus, as we'll hear about, there's disease, and the disease weakened all of the tribes in California. Up to 90%, we think, died from non-native diseases that non-native people brought to California. One little fact for you to keep in mind is that California Indians, some of them did become Catholic when they joined the missions. And when they did that, then they weren't supposed to get divorced. But traditionally, the native peoples in California could divorce if they wanted to have a divorce, if they didn't want to stay married. Question that could end up on a quiz. Okay, so you probably have heard about the Grayton Rancheria Casino in Rohnert Park. It makes millions of dollars every year. But what you might not have known is that the chairperson, Dr. Greg Saras, he had the vision for this idea of getting land for his tribe, because his tribe no longer had land in California, and or maybe an acre or two, but almost no land. And he thought, well, let's get some land, let's have the tribe recognized and the members recognized, and then let's put a casino on this land so that we can have money that we can use to help the education and health care for the people who are in our tribe. And it was a great struggle. It required congressional approval, a compact with the state of California. It's interesting if you want to read about the history of how did this casino come about. But eventually it did get approved, and with partners from Las Vegas, the casino was built, and now it makes millions of dollars every year. But what you might not have known is that he is a Sonoma State University professor, at this point emeritus, and he also has written books, including books that have Native American stories in it. So we're going to be hearing a story that he has collected and sharing on a PBS video. So here we go.
Than the Western world, where we have the Western world has God on top, and then man, and then woman, and so forth. For us, the people are really kind of the lowest, and the animals maintain and contain all the wisdom of the world, and it's our job to kind of be watching them and learning from them about our mistakes and who we are. But anyway, the stories take place, and the animals, much like people, the animals that were people in this time before this one, had a lot of the characteristics of people, and they made the same mistakes that we make. So I think the best thing perhaps I could do is read a short portion of the book, and maybe that'll answer some of the questions that we have. The book is basically there's two people talking, or two crows. They're twin sisters. They're crows, or they're people. And one is Answer Woman, and she has all the answers, but she can't answer anything unless somebody asks the question. And Question Woman can't remember anything, so she has to ask. The notion there, Steve, is interdependence. We need one another. So and also I use that as a way to replicate the oral storytelling, which these stories are based on Coast Miwok and Southern Pomo storytelling cycle of creation. So I'll read a small portion, and maybe that'll help answer some of the questions. Anyway, this is between the two stories, and they're talking before they get to another one. But it begins, the day was beautiful, warm. The twin sisters, Question Woman and Answer Woman, continued sitting atop the fence rail on Gravity Hill. It was spring. Birds sang, cows in the distance grazed. Sonoma Mountain was awash in spectacular color. I am thinking of so many things after hearing about how Coyote created people, said Question Woman. And I'm confused. Are you and I people, or are we crows? We are all people still, answered Answer Woman. Some of us took the form of animals, some the form of human beings. But the point is, we are all relatives. We are all related. We have eyes and ears. We all talk. We all have stories. We come from the same village, after all. That is the lesson of this mountain. But people can't hear us. I mean, they hear us, but they don't know what we are saying. That man who just rode by on his bicycle, he might hear us squawk, but he doesn't know what we're saying. Oh, the old people of this village, the human descendants of Coyote, they could understand the animals. They communicated with the animals and plants through songs and dreams, and of course, through stories. You see, in the stories, we are always both humans and animals. That is, we are all people. But the newest people, the people who left this mountain and then came back, many of them are called the forgetters, the humans who forgot the stories of this mountain. What happened? They went away, settled in places all over the world with the stories that they could use for wherever they settled. They could change the stories to suit the places they settled, as long as the stories taught them the same lessons, that we are all one people, animals, plants, and human beings, and that we must always think of and remember one another that way. Oh, yes, that makes me think of what you said a while back, before the last story. I asked where the cows and starlings came from, and the wild turkeys. Yes, so it was these forgetter people who brought them. Yes, sister, that is right. Many things happened when the forgetter people returned here. They brought new animals and plants, yes, but the forgetters also killed all of the bears and the elk and the pronghorn. They cut down trees. You see, they forgot the stories. They forgot we are all one people, and the animals, indeed the entire mountain, began to suffer. Now we must all try to learn to live together. We must all remember the stories again. But how? Well, we must tell the stories and ask that everyone learn from them. People can always change the stories to suit their needs, as long as the stories teach the same lessons of love and respect for all of life. The stories can change? Of course, I said so already. The stories always change for different times and different places.
I love that. Okay, so the forgetters. Let's talk about the forgetters, because in thinking about this, I thought about, and this may be a funny leap, our fires in 2017. And the idea that what we had forgotten was what the Indians here knew, who had lived here for thousands of years, that we needed to make small fires to avoid huge fires. So that's just one kind of a small example, but you're intimating that there are bigger examples, that we've forgotten things even more important than these fires.
Well, yes, I mean, one of the fundamental things to think about, and there's two ways, is that, again, there's been a notion among environmentalists in the past that nature just should be left alone, that we weren't a part of it. We were always coexisting here for thousands upon thousands of years, and who's counting? You know, people always say to me, Steve, oh, did you come down the Bering Straits? And I said, I don't know, but I have my bearings straight. We coexisted. So we pruned the trees. We took eggs from certain nests so that there wouldn't be too many birds. We cut the sedges in the sand so that the sedge roots would grow longer for baskets. We kept the creeks cleared, the water clear. We took care of things. We worked. We coexisted with nature.
Okay, so you can look up that video if you'd like to see the whole video. It's about half an hour long total, but this was the one part that had to do with the story that he shared, and then it kind of moves on to talk about other things regarding the tribe, and of course, since they're sitting at the steakhouse at the casino, from what they mentioned at the intro, they'll be talking about the casino and his tribe. So for this week, we've learned about a few things more about California Indians. I hope that it was interesting for you. Please be sure to, of course, read the book and watch the video for the week, which will teach you even more. Thanks for coming. See you online.